All right, welcome to the first podcast video, Mystic Physics. I'm reinvigorating, recreating this and reapproaching it. This project's been sitting for at least 3 years. The last book that I did was the poetry book. So I'm excited that I'm finally working on a new book, which is actually an old book that I really wanted to do for many, many, many years. And it looks like it's come together. And just like the Zen saying, we'll see. Just like the Zen saying, fall down seven, get up eight. Well, I mean, I've fallen down at least 10, 15 times on this project because it's a monster. And then the question is, well, what is this project then? And the answer is, this is a book that I've been wanting to do for, I don't know, 15 years or so. It was actually the original book that I was planning on doing. And it just got too heavy, too big, too dense, and too unwieldy to handle. So all these books, the Science and Perception book, it's a dialogue, the analogical geometry book that I did, and then even the poetry book, they all work with this because it's a different approach to science. And really, it's looking at the history of science in the West and this idea that at one point in time, science and spirituality, at least in the West, were tightly interlocked with each other. And it wasn't based on belief either. What you'll find out, and what I've been writing about and will be writing about more, is that the mystic approach is actually similar to science in that they're testing things. Now, are they using a laboratory? Are they using physical things? Not necessarily, but they're not just going on belief. And this is where mysticism and religion kind of diverge, even though most religions or many religions were actually based on mystical teachings. So what ends up happening is you have this rigorous set of practices or these practices that think of them like experiments or a lab, but the lab is the human being. So you're actually, and your lab is you, and you're experimenting with consciousness and the senses. So really, right out of the gate, what I start talking about is spiritual enlightenment, which is different than the enlightenment. But spiritual enlightenment and looking at it, getting people to understand that this is not an attainment. People are like, oh, this is something that I want to attain or grab. And you can see me clutching here. It's not like that. I can't just buy my way or build my way to it. So it's more of, especially if you look at Lao Tzu and Eastern philosophy, it's more of a non-attainment. It's more of a letting go of these preconceived ideas. But then, and at its core, the Enlightenment, the mystic approach, the mystic philosophy is that you can have a direct relationship with the divine, like a direct realization of the divine. Now, this is controversial for a number of reasons, especially within religions, but it's also controversial in the sense of Western philosophy, modern Western science, because we're so fragmented. So, what's really underpinning this model is there's a lack of separation. There's speaking towards unity and wholeness, which is also a big thing in scientific community and physics, especially with like the work of someone like David Bohm. So where am I going with this? Well, it's taken like a decade and a half plus, and then martial arts experience before that, and Eastern philosophy coming back to the West. So what I'm interpreting, so I've got an interpretive model that kind of gives a map, like a mystic physics, like a mystic map, so to speak. And it's rigorous as far as I can tell. And it'll be interesting to see what people say when I start releasing some things. But what we're doing is we're going to map the universe. We're going to map it from the perspective of mystics. We're going to use the Eastern view first, because that's what I was introduced to. And that allowed me to interpret the West. So there's two models that are so similar. But where it's interesting is that in the East, in the East, you have this tradition of mysticism, of enlightenment, and spiritual enlightenment, but it's not as tightly tied, at least as far as I understand, it's not as tightly tied to science in terms of mechanical manufacturing. It is tied, it does have influence in medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, things like that, and healing. In the West, what I found that was fascinating is that a lot of modern Western science, especially the math, especially when it comes to geometry, it has its underpinnings in mysticism. So you have a lot of these philosophers that are highly regarded, people like Plato, especially. Then you have someone like Plotinus, who is, but he was used by, his teachings were used by Islam, by Christianity, by Judaism. So you do have this overlap of science and spirituality in the West. And that's kind of where I'm going. And you can kind of trace a thread from the last, I don't know, for a long time. So I will be delving into some of the things from Egypt, thanks to a woman named Susan Bryn Morrow, who came out with a book that reinterprets the pyramid texts from, I believe they're about 2525 BC. We're not going to start there, but we're going to jump in there at some point because there's some really fascinating things with the way she interprets hieroglyphs and really saying that one of the reasons why things come out to be so primitive looking is because a lot of the people in the 1900s had that view and they assumed that they were reading prose, whereas her assertion, and she has multiple degrees in poetry, um, let's see, she's got a degree like PhD combination poetry, Egyptology, and also Arabic. So she's got multiple languages that she can draw from, multiple perspectives. So I'm definitely going to pull from her with that and kind of tying into the mystic worldview. But for now, and we're going to get into symbols and symbolism. I am going to pull from tarot and working on some designs here, which is this is another art project, but they actually interlock. So we've got symbol of the sword. We'll explain why that's often associated with the intellect, and then similar the batons. So the book is going to have a lot of illustrations. It's going to have a fair amount of artwork in it. But the idea is that I can communicate more easily about the cutting nature of the intellect and intellectual analysis with a sword or cutting instrument than I can by writing prose definition. So we're playing with language here. We're playing with the language of symbols. And just to give you an idea, yep, this is what writing is really about. Totally like just carving it up for those of you who want to write or anything. This is going to get chopped up, be put together. I posted a sample chapter titles up today with quotes, if you're curious. Chapter 1, Spiritual Enlightenment. Um, and I don't remember the other chapters. It's so funny. And that's how I can tell when I'm in the flow. But it does start with spiritual enlightenment, and we are working at building a model of the universe that is logically coherent, works with reason, but basically works on unity or wholeness. And that's what you would need in order to have an experience. And modern science, at least in the West, tends to be based upon more fragmentation. This was noted by Bone. And even though the maths in physics for relativity and quantum tend to say, hey, the underlying nature of reality is wholeness. So I'm not striking an equivalence here between quantum and um, mysticism, but you're going to see some similarities in things, but there is a difference. I'm not going to make that jump. I might do something in possible applications, but I'm trying to keep this not just rigorous, but clear. I want people to come to their own conclusions, and that's another big thing. This is not me teaching. This is me sharing a perspective, sharing an interpretation, and hopefully giving you enough space that you can have your own interpretations and experiences. So I'm drawing off my own experience. And if you're interested, it'll be interesting to see what your interpretations are. And the biggest thing is we're all responsible for interpreting our own lives. And that was really the mystic path is believe nothing, test everything. So it's up to us to test everything. And as we'll see, this got into some interesting things in the 1900s when rationalism came in and people were railing against it, but then they tried to be just as rational as the people that they were criticizing, which often happens. So that ties in with some things with tarot symbolism, and a group trying to reorganize the deck and correct mistakes. So we're gonna have some fun, but I wanted to share because I'm really excited. This project's taken forever, and it feels like it's pulling together. We'll find out. But once again, fall down 7, get up 8. In this case, fall down 15, 16 times, get up 17, 18 times. So we'll see where it goes, but I'll keep you posted. Take care. Thanks for tuning in.